Estadio Chivas in Guadalajara could not be more perfectly placed in the center of Mexico, thousands of kilometers away from both the southern US states to the north and the lush jungles of Guatemala and Belize to the south. It's a perfect footballing island. It's where the drums of the Club Deportivo Guadalajara fans have been beating loudly for over 100 years now. And they were in full rhythm when Chivas brushed aside Tecos FC with a 5-2 drubbing in 2011 during their Liga MX clash. Chivas forward Marco Fabian scored a hat-trick during the game, but on this evening it wasn't the hat-trick he would be remembered for. Instead, it was a celebration that mirrored a darker reality of Mexican society. During the celebrations of one of his goals, he depicted a particularly violent scene. Fabian mimicked an execution with his teammate. After the match, both players received fines totaling thousands of dollars and had to apologize publicly. In the weeks that followed, both players also donated a large sum of money to an orphanage in Juarez, a city at the epicenter of the nation's suffocating drug war. Of all the active war zones in the world today, it's the Mexican drug war which comes out on top for the most casualties. And while the bullets are flying in a haze of ongoing gang warfare across the nation, the Mexican Football League, the Liga MX, has been seeing record profits, with billion-dollar businesses involved with each major footballing franchise. All the while, the Mexican footballing pride takes a knock each international window, as El Tri continues to fall short of the sky-high expectations set by its millions of fanatical fans. Every footballing landscape has a weird way of reflecting the social climate of the nation in which it's played. But in Mexico, the link between the two runs deeper than you could ever imagine. In Mexico, football is tightly embedded into every fiber of its society. This connection has existed since the moment the world's game kicked off in front of 107,000 roaring fans at Estadio Azteca when the FIFA World Cup came to Mexico for the first time in 1970. Ever since this moment, the ball has not stopped rolling. Football has continued to embed itself into every corner of Mexican life. On the surface, Liga MX and football in Mexico remain thriving enterprises. Financially, the league is valued at a staggering 800 million euros, nearly 3 times the net worth of both the Scottish Premiership and the Saudi Pro League, which sit at around 300 million euros respectively. Players are well compensated too. The league's average matchday attendance ranks 4th in the world, and the top earning players all take home north of €1 million a year. For context, the MLS has an average salary of $400,000 per year. The desire to earn money overseas isn't as strong for Mexican talent. Where would they go? Their local league is the top dog for thousands of miles in all directions. And 100 million Mexican football fans flock the streets around filled stadiums in cities around the nation to sing your name. But these cities and these streets tell another story as well. Beneath the surface of this thriving football culture lies a country grappling with profound challenges, ones that inevitably seep into the sport itself. The effects of corruption, money laundering, and the influence of cartels are in an everlasting struggle with the boundless footballing potential across the Mexican fields. So, what can we learn from the Mexican football story? Where did the spark go? And how do these issues manifest within the game, slowly suffocating it in the process? In 2020, to the shock of neutral observers, the Mexican FA scrapped promotion and relegation into Liga MX. The financial gap to the second tier was simply too big. Promoted teams didn't have the facilities to handle Liga MX games, and Liga MX teams were too well established to participate in the league beneath. Essentially, the top of the pyramid was overloaded with massive commercial investments from every direction, which came at the cost of the rest of the footballing world in Mexico, or any club which hasn't had the opportunity to graze with big Mexican business investments and ownership. On the one hand, the decision gave the second tier a moment to catch its breath, and hopefully, by the time promotion and relegation is reinstated in 2026, have developed the facilities necessary to handle top-tier football when it comes knocking. But on the other hand, it left behind a vacuum. The top 18 teams in Mexico now existed on a tiny island, with no risk of ever losing their place. Perched comfortably on their thrones, win or lose, the money is there, and the competitiveness has suffered. It also highlights another key problem. The money isn't adding up. How can one side of the footballing coin be drowning in investment, but the other side seems to be struggling to host a professional match? But as we'll learn in Mexico, when big business is involved with your club, something sinister is likely lurking around the very next corner. Take for example the Liga MX side Cruz Azul. On paper, it's a beaming ray of sunshine in the Mexican football landscape. The club has a Cinderella footballing origin story. The Cementos, as they go by, grew out of factory workers from a cement construction company in Mexico City, which goes by the same name as the club. That company are still owners and operators of this club to this day, ever since their establishment over 100 years ago. Well, in 2020, the president of the club, Billy Alvarez, who also happens to be the grandson of the founder of the Cruz Azul cement company, was suddenly wanted by the police. Board members had discovered a giant web of illicit dealings in the club's finances, headed by Billy and 3 other executives, with a missing gap of over 400 million pesos funneled to overseas shell companies. There were also links to organized crime groups, evidence of fake sponsorships, fake valuations of players, and extortion. Billy is currently wanted on charges by Interpol in 195 countries. He's still missing to this day. The club's manager, Romano, was also kidnapped in 2005. A ransom of $500,000 was posted for his release. During his time in captivity, he was replaced as manager by his assistant. Amazingly, the club kept on the assistant manager as coach after Romano was finally released 65 days later. But I'll let you decide if you find that one fishy or not. We have to remember that during this whole time, the club is operating as normal. The players are being paid handsomely and the fans are filling the stadiums. Football in Mexico continues as usual, even though its gruesome underbelly is constantly rearing its head. And this is where we hit the strange reality of football in Mexico. It's a constant collision between massive footballing passion with such popularity that its potential commercial gains attract billion-dollar business entities from both sides of the legal divide. These entities will do what it takes to lock the money in, at whatever the cost. And the flow-on effects from this get increasingly more bizarre and counterproductive to a healthy footballing ecosystem. Today, nearly half of the 18 teams in Liga MX are multi-owned. Currently, 6 sides in the league share an owner with another Liga MX side. That doesn't sound like the most competitive footballing landscape, and many people believe that it opens the door to match fixing and collusion in a country which we know struggles to close the door to its criminal world. The truth is that this ownership model stems from the fact Mexico is staunchly protective over their footballing pride. Foreign influence is not welcome, and they will defend their footballing world in every way they can. And it can be seen materialized in other ways as well, like the Pacto de Caballeros, a gentleman's agreement abolished in 2018. Under this agreement, Mexican players had limited control over their career moves. Even after their contracts had expired, their Liga MX club retained the right to determine their future transfers, both domestically and internationally. Clubs would use this law to ask for insane transfer values from overseas clubs, oftentimes blocking development moves. Domestically, the agreement resulted in a closed market when it came to player negotiations between clubs. Players would have no say over these negotiations, and clubs were free to speak with whoever they fancied, asking unfair fees from competitors and giving good deals to their buddies. We can see Mexico's insular and controlling stance on football play out internationally as well, not just with the struggling national team, but also with the Copa Libertadores, essentially the South American Champions League, which the Mexican FA decided to no longer participate in 2016, as it would clash with the domestic league schedule back home. When given the choice, football in Mexico will always choose for its own homegrown players, clubs, owners, and competition, at whatever cost, which in some ways is a beautiful thing. But it seems the problem with an insular strategy like this is that as a nation, Mexico cannot escape its criminal world, whose sights have naturally landed on the billion-dollar football business here. This strange business culture can be seen recurring in the industry, and the massive amounts of money changing hands daily at the top of the footballing pyramid has resulted in a chasm of development at the bottom and a lack of competitiveness at the top. In recent years, the Mexican FA have attempted to change many of these issues, like implementing new multi-ownership laws and abolishing the Pacto de Caballeros, as they look to take back their place among football's heavyweights. A place the passion on display here every match day deserves. The last time Mexico reached beyond the round of 16 at the FIFA World Cup was in 1986, and they were the hosts. With the World Cup returning to Mexican soil in 2026, the hope is to reignite the footballing flame that has been gasping for air for decades. From the iconic Estadio Azteca, setting Mexico's footballing spirit ablaze once again for the world to see. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. There's so much to the Mexican football story, it's hard to fit all of it into one YouTube video, so feel free to leave your thoughts on the topic below. This particular video was actually suggested by a commenter on my previous video, so if you have any topics you would like me to take a look at, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Have a great day, and goodbye.